She received a decaying woodland cabin that everyone claimed had no value. A spiteful present from an aunt who could hardly remember her. But when the struggling mom finally smashed open the blocked cellar entrance, what she discovered wasn't rot or filth, but a wealth of precious gems that would transform everything she believed about kinship, mercy, and the cost of hiding truths. Before we begin, share where in the world you're tuning in from. If you like tales like this one, be sure to smash that subscribe button because tomorrow's story is absolutely incredible. Let's begin. The envelope showed up on a Tuesday when Sarah Caldwell was already behind. Her 7-year-old boy Mason had knocked over orange juice onto his last fresh school outfit. The vehicle was creating that scraping sound once more, and the disconnect warning from the power provider lay untouched on the kitchen surface like an explosive ready to detonate. She nearly ignored the registered letter. One more debt. One more difficulty. One more burden on arms already holding too much. Yet the sender's location grabbed her attention. Harrington Associates. Property lawyers. Sarah's fingers quivered slightly as she ripped apart the package. Within, expensive legal paper declared what appeared unbelievable. Her Aunt Vivian, a lady she'd encountered precisely 2 occasions in her entire existence, had bequeathed her real estate in her final wishes. Not cash, not valuables, not anything practical. A dwelling. A dwelling far into the Appalachian Mountains, 40 miles from the closest settlement, encircled by nothing except evergreen woods and recollections nobody desired to discuss. The cooking area abruptly seemed more confined, the boundaries squeezing inward as Sarah examined the information. The Brackenridge property, constructed in 1892, positioned on 60 plots of virgin wilderness. No loan, no claims, simply hers if she desired it. The condition? She must take possession of it personally within 30 days, or it would be auctioned publicly. Mason pulled on her arm. "Mom, I'll miss the bus." She returned to awareness, back to their confined living space with its moisture-damaged roof and residents who quarreled nightly, to the 3 positions that scarcely paid housing costs, to the existence that seemed like suffocating gradually. "Okay, we need to leave, sweetheart." Yet as she transported Mason to his educational facility in her decade-and-a-half-old Honda, the document scorched in her bag like a hidden truth. A residence, even a damaged one, exceeded anything she'd previously possessed. Even a spiteful present beat, having nothing whatsoever. That night, once Mason had fallen asleep, Sarah contacted the sole family member who remained in communication, her cousin Janet, Vivian's offspring. The discussion was brief and harsh. "That ancient wreck," Janet cackled, the noise piercing like shattered crystal. "She bequeathed you the woodland cabin." Heavens, even deceased, Mother understood how to inflict pain. "What's your meaning?" Sarah questioned. "Sweetheart, that location has 0 worth. It's been decomposing since the 1970s. No power, no plumbing, likely filled with toxic fungus and nastier things. Mother used to claim it was where the relatives concealed their errors." Another cackle. "Suppose that explains why she gave it to you. The statement injured precisely as planned." Sarah had been the relative's error, expecting at 19, separated at 22, battling continuously afterward. The family members who possessed wealth acted like she was invisible. The ones lacking wealth acted superior regardless. And Aunt Vivian, frigid and scheming even at relative funerals, had seemingly chosen to remind everybody precisely where Sarah belonged. Receiving garbage, because that constituted her entire value. Yet something determined sparked in Sarah's core, the identical thing that caused her to labor 3 positions without protesting. That caused her to attend every single one of Mason's educational gatherings, even when she'd gotten no rest. That caused her to persist when halting would have been considerably simpler. "I'm planning to examine it," she stated. Janet's cackling ceased. "You're genuine? It belongs to me, correct? Your loss. Don't claim I failed to caution you." 3 sunrises afterward, Sarah positioned herself at the boundary of the land, Mason's palm comfortable in hers. The navigation system had stopped functioning 2 miles earlier, and she'd tracked manually sketched instructions from the attorney's location. "Rotate left at the storm-damaged oak. Right following the stream. Search for the corroded entrance that possibly disappeared." Yet it remained present, dangling askew on aged connectors. The term Brackenridge, scarcely distinguishable underneath multiple years of corrosion. Past it, an unpaved path vanished into darkness, formed by enormous evergreens. The woodland squeezed tightly from every direction, timeless and observant. And hidden in its core rested her bequest. "It resembles a storybook," Mason murmured. "Vision enormous." Sarah tightened his palm. Not the pleasant variety, she considered, but remained silent. The vegetation appeared to murmur cautions as they proceeded, limbs forming a covering so dense the midday sunlight scarcely entered. The atmosphere carried the scent of soil and Antiquity and something additional, something that created a desire to reverse. Direction. Then they observed it. The dwelling appeared from the woodland like an abandoned structure. 3 levels of worn timber and rock, opening shadowy as vacant vision. Encircling veranda drooping under the burden of innumerable cold seasons. Creepers ascended the barriers like clutching appendages. The entrance opening dangled ajar, an opening prepared to consume whatever proved foolish enough to step inside. Mason squeezed against her limb. "Must we enter inside?" Sarah gazed at her bequest. This spiteful present from a lady who'd never demonstrated her compassion. This structure to her position in the relatives' ranking. Everybody had been accurate. It possessed 0 worth. It was decomposing. It was ridiculous. And it belonged to her. "Not presently," she spoke gently. "Yet we'll return. We'll improve it. Because even spiteful presents could be altered. Even valueless objects could discover value." She'd been demonstrating that her complete existence. The following dawn, Sarah departed Mason with her aged resident, Mrs. Chen, and traveled back unaccompanied. She required to observe it without her boy's concerned vision. Required to evaluate precisely how terrible her bequest genuinely was. This occasion she transported equipment, a leverage bar, illumination device, protective hand coverings, and a particle covering. If nothing additional, she could minimally search for anything recoverable to auction. The dwelling remained calm as a snare. The entrance opening screeched as she forced it completely ajar, exposing an entrance area that must have previously been impressive. A light fixture dangled at a hazardous position, crystals gray with particles. The timber surfaces, distorted and discolored, moaned beneath her mass. Yet the structure's framework, the base, the barriers, appeared sturdy, constructed to endure, even if nobody had provided it the opportunity. Chamber by chamber, Sarah investigated. The furnishings, blanketed in particle coverings, was predominantly decomposed past rescuing. The cooking area hadn't been modernized since the 1950s. The elevated sleeping chambers were exhibitions of desertion, garments remaining in storage spaces. Images on furniture surfaces, as if the relatives had merely disappeared one sunrise. It was in the tiniest sleeping chamber that she located the initial hint. A youth's chamber, colored gentle lemon underneath the filth. On the compact workspace rested a hide notebook, maintained by the arid atmosphere. Sarah unsealed it cautiously. The sheets were occupied with a youthful female's meticulous penmanship. "Father claims the particular chamber is our hidden truth. He claims eventually when I'm matured I'll comprehend why we maintain it secured." Particular chamber. Sarah's heartbeat accelerated. She'd been throughout the complete dwelling. There existed no secured chamber. Unless the underground level. She'd observed the entrance, colored across so numerous occasions it merged into the barrier, yet hadn't attempted it yet. Presently she traveled back to the slender entrance beside the cooking area, sliding her appendages across the structure. No grip, simply an opening for a key occupied with multiple years of coloring. She retrieved her leverage bar. The coloring fractured and separated as she labored, exposing aged timber underneath. The entrance had been blocked intentionally, meticulously. For what reason? It required 60 minutes of forcing, the timber fragmenting and objecting, before the entrance ultimately surrendered with a noise like a fracturing skeleton. Past was obscurity and a slender stairway descending downward. The atmosphere that surged upward carried the scent of elements and hidden truths. Sarah activated her illumination device and descended. The underground level was distinct from the remainder of the dwelling. More hygienic, more arid. The barriers were rock, accurately assembled. The surface was polished cement. It seemed more like a secure storage than a cellar. At the distant conclusion, her illumination device ray captured something that caused her to cease respiration. One more entrance, this one metallic, with a numerical mechanism that appeared excessively contemporary for the dwelling. She neared gradually, observing the absence of particles, the manner the connectors glistened with recent lubricant. Somebody had been preserving this. Somebody who possessed entry to the dwelling that was supposedly deserted. Her palms quivered as she attempted the grip. Secured, naturally, yet present, engraved into the metallic beside the mechanism, were digits, 11, 29, 53, a calendar marking. Sarah retrieved the notebook she'd located elevated, rotating through sheets. Present, November 29th, 1953, mother's birth sunrise. Father claims it's the most significant sunrise to recall, her appendages shaking. She rotated the numerical mechanism. Snap, 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 the entrance unsealed. Sarah's illumination device ray traveled across the concealed chamber, and her limbs nearly collapsed. The barriers were arranged with metallic platforms, and on every platform rested tiny fabric pouches, transparent containers, timber receptacles. She neared the closest platform with vision-like movements, extending for a violet fabric pouch. Within, precious stones captured her illumination device ray and reflected it backward in 1,000 paths. Unprocessed, unformed precious stones, each the dimension of a fingernail. She released the pouch, palm quivering. One more container, additional precious stones, a timber receptacle, precious stones combined with what resembled green gems, platform following platform of valuable rocks, organized by dimension and transparency, marked with calendar markings stretching back multiple years. In the middle of the chamber positioned an aged workspace. On it, a hide-covered record book, and a manila package with her identity inscribed across it. Sarah's identity, not the relative's surname. Not to whoever it concerns, her particular identity. As if somebody had understood she would be the individual to locate this. She unsealed the package with senseless appendages. Within, a document in Vivian's recognizable penmanship. Sarah, if you're examining this, then you were more resilient than I calculated. Resilient enough to disregard the ridicule. Courageous enough to take possession of what they entirely claimed possessed zero worth, intelligent enough to search more profoundly. The reality is, I've observed you from remoteness for multiple years. Observed you battle. Observed you continue. Observed you nurture that boy with elegance despite possessing nothing. You reminded me of myself at your age, before the relative's wealth corrupted everything, before I discovered to be spiteful to exist among spiteful individuals. This underground level holds my ancestors' inheritance, concealed from the authorities during the economic collapse, concealed from avaricious relatives continuously afterward. Formally, these precious stones don't exist. Formally, this dwelling possesses zero worth, yet I'm exhausted of formal narratives. The relatives handled you like garbage because you selected affection over wealth, because you maintained your infant when they claimed you shouldn't, because you declined to participate in their competitions. They ridiculed you for being impoverished, while positioned on wealth they never acquired. So I'm providing you what they never understood existed. $15 million in rocks, approximately. Sufficient to never be ridiculed once more. Yet here's my genuine present. If you're intelligent enough to accept it, don't permit it to alter you. Don't transform like us. Utilize it to construct something superior. Vivian. Sarah descended to the surface, the document wrinkling in her hold. Beyond her cranium, $15 million in precious stones sparkled like celestial bodies she'd never presumed to desire upon. All those years of scarcely existing, of selecting between food and fuel, of observing Mason's expression when she had to state, "not this month," to every tiny petition. All those relative assemblies where they'd gazed through her like she was transparent, murmured about her errors, utilized her battles as cautionary narratives for their personal offspring. And throughout, Vivian had been observing, scheming, anticipating. She considered Janet's ridiculing cackle of the relatives who would discover about this and abruptly recall her identity. She considered Mason, who merited considerably more than she'd been capable to provide. She considered the selections forward, how to transform rocks to security without demolishing herself in the procedure. Yet initially, she positioned in that hidden chamber and sobbed. Not from melancholy, but from the absolute burden of potential. For the initial occasion in her existence, she wasn't suffocating. She could respire, and that frightened her nearly as significantly as destitution ever had. Subsequently, back in the particle-filled elevated area, Sarah located additional notebooks, additional fragments of the narrative. The precious stones had originated from an excavation in South Africa, legitimately obtained by her great-great ancestor, yet never declared when he relocated. Each generation had contributed to the accumulation, maintaining it hidden, maintaining it protected, until Vivian, who possessed no offspring, she confided, who had observed her relatives transform into everything she detested. What occurs subsequently will expose the genuine cost of concealed wealth and the strength of a mother's affection to alter not simply her personal existence, but a complete society that had dismissed her. If you're appreciating this narrative, please approve, distribute, and register for additional. Continuing with the rest of the story in the same rewritten style, Sarah's initial reaction was to seize everything and flee, to pack her vehicle with precious stones and vanish somewhere. Nobody recognized her identity. Where the murmurs couldn't pursue, where Mason could mature without the burden of other individuals' criticisms. Yet as she positioned in that underground secure storage, encircled by more wealth than she'd ever imagined, Vivian's statements resonated. Don't transform like us. She accepted solely 3 rocks. Tiny ones, scarcely the dimension of legumes. Sufficient to confirm they were genuine. Sufficient to commence creating schemes. Then she meticulously sealed the secure storage, rotated the mechanism, and blocked the underground level entrance as optimally as she could. The dwelling abruptly seemed less like a spiteful present and more like an examination, one she was resolved to succeed. The subsequent week progressed in confusion. Sarah located a careful gem expert 2 territories distant, somebody suggested by an attorney who concentrated on unusual bequests. The 3 precious stones were genuine, extremely genuine, valued approximately $40,000 each. The aged gem expert had gazed at her beyond his spectacles with understanding vision. There are additional, aren't present. She'd neither validated nor rejected. Yet his departing guidance remained with her. Be cautious, be intelligent. Rocks like these possess a method of altering individuals, and not constantly the ones who locate them. Sarah traveled back to the woodland dwelling unaccompanied. This occasion she transported distinct equipment, a recording book, a capturing device, evaluation ribbon. She wasn't present for the precious stones. She was present for the dwelling itself, because a concept had established foundation, one that expanded more powerful with each chamber she recorded. The framework was sturdy. The position was remote but attractive. The structure of something impressive still existed underneath the disregard. What if she didn't auction the precious stones? What if she utilized them distinctly? That darkness she positioned with Mason at their confined cooking area surface, assisting him with educational assignments while her intellect accelerated. He was battling with a narrative difficulty about distributing. If you possess something particular, he vocalized aloud, do you maintain it entirely for yourself or distribute with others? Sarah's writing instrument became motionless. What's your opinion? Mason bit his mouth tissue, considering. I suppose if you maintain it entirely, you receive additional. Yet if you distribute, everybody becomes content. And that's superior, accurate? From the oral cavities of youngsters, the scheme developed gradually, meticulously. Sarah auctioned 5 precious stones through the careful gem expert, sufficient to eliminate obligations, guarantee Mason's future, and establish a restoration fund. The remainder remained secured in the secure storage, anticipating. She employed construction workers from 3 settlements distant, individuals who wouldn't spread rumors, wouldn't interrogate where the wealth originated. The explanation narrative was elementary. Existence protection from a relative she'd never understood existed. As the woodland dwelling altered, so did Sarah's perspective. This wouldn't simply be her departure. It would be others as well. A sanctuary for struggling mothers like her. Females who required a pause, a respiration, an opportunity to recall they were beyond their battles. The woodland dwelling would transform into what it had been for her, a location where ridicule altered into potential. Yet, compact settlements possess vision everywhere. The construction workers communicated despite guarantees. Transportations were observed. The relatives who'd abandoned Sarah suddenly recalled her telephone digits. Janet contacted initially, tone saturating with artificial pleasantness. Sarah, I discovered you're repairing Mother's ancient location. How magnificent. You understand, I've been planning to explore. Then arrived Uncle Howard, who hadn't communicated to her since she'd declined to surrender the infant for placement. Relatives should remain unified, he stated, as if the previous 11 years hadn't occurred. The ridicule had reversed to abrupt curiosity, and Sarah identified the appetite in their tones. They detected wealth like predatory fish detect circulation. The reality would have to appear ultimately, yet initially Sarah required supporters. She located them in unexpected locations. Mrs. Chen, who'd observed Mason all those years for scarcely any compensation, who sobbed when Sarah transferred her a payment that would address her granddaughter's medical expenses. Marcus Thompson, the construction worker, who'd provided her reasonable calculations when others attempted to overcharge the desperate, struggling mom, who presently possessed sufficient labor to employ 2 fresh teams. Elena Vasquez, the community laborer who'd assisted Sarah maneuver the arrangement, who leaped at the opportunity to assist design schedules for the sanctuary. United, they established something the precious stones couldn't obtain. A society of individuals who comprehended that genuine wealth wasn't about what you maintained, but what you constructed for others. The sunrise the relatives arrived was a Saturday. They arrived in a procession, expensive vehicles appearing misplaced on the woodland path. Janet guided the assault, fashionable footwear descending into the gentle soil, expression distorted between a grin and a snarl. "Don't you consider relatives should have been informed about your favorable circumstances?" Sarah positioned on the veranda of the altered dwelling, openings glistening, recent coloring vivid against the woodland setting. Within, Elena was guiding a cluster of struggling mothers through introduction for the sanctuary's initial weekend. Their offspring's cackling resonated from the restored chambers. "Relatives?" Sarah inquired gently. "Where were relatives when I was laboring 3 positions? When Mason required medical procedure and I had to select between the treatment and maintaining our living space?" Uncle Howard advanced forward. "Presently, let's not excavate up the history." "The history?" Sarah cackled, the noise piercing as cold atmosphere. "You signify previous month when you traversed the pathway to prevent communicating to me, or previous year when you informed your offspring I was a cautionary narrative." Janet's covering deteriorated. "Mother departed that dwelling to you as ridicule." "We entirely comprehend it. Whatever you located present belongs to the relatives. She departed it to me," Sarah disrupted, "because she comprehended I was the sole individual who wouldn't be contaminated by it. Because she observed all of you ridicule me for selecting affection over wealth, for maintaining my boy, for existing without your assistance. She retrieved the document Vivian had departed, presently preserved and valuable. Would you desire me to vocalize what she genuinely considered of the relatives?" The relatives transferred, uncomfortable. Behind Sarah, expressions materialized in openings, the other mothers, the offspring, the society she'd constructed, not with precious stones, but with intention. "Here's what's planning to occur," Sarah stated. "The sanctuary remains. The schedules remain. The females and offspring who require this location remain. You're permitted to explore if you can succeed the identical evaluation procedure as everybody additional. Demonstrate you require assistance. Demonstrate you're prepared to assist others. Or depart." It was Janet who fractured initially, advancing backward. "You cannot." "This isn't legitimate," Sarah grinned. "I possess extremely capable attorneys presently. Ones who concentrate on defending charitable establishments from predatory relatives. Individually they departed, wheel coverings rotating in the soil, departing behind solely the resonance of their expensive motors and the odor of incinerated connections. Sarah observed them depart, then reversed back to the dwelling. In the entrance opening, Mason positioned with a cluster of youngsters his age, all attiring coordinating garments with the sanctuary's symbol, a dwelling encircled by vegetation with celestial bodies distinguishable through the limbs. "Mom," he contacted outward, "Miss Elena claims evening meals prepared. You arriving?" She was. The sanctuary formally commenced 3 months subsequently, the Brackenridge shelter for struggling mothers and offspring. The initial weekend accommodated 6 relatives. Within a year, present existed the anticipation catalog. The schedules broadened. Employment preparation, offspring supervision, guidance, legitimate assistance, all financed by precious stones that had rested in obscurity for multiple years, presently altered into illumination. Sarah maintained meticulous documents. Every rock auctioned. Every dollar expended, every relative assisted. The record book that had previously monitored concealed wealth presently monitored something more valuable, existences altered. Offspring who could vision larger, mothers who could respire simpler, yet the precious stones weren't unlimited. Sarah comprehended that, which explains why she commenced the subsequent phase, instructing the mother's abilities, assisting them commence enterprises, establishing a network that would exceed any treasure. The genuine bequest Vivian had departed wasn't the rocks. It was the opportunity to demonstrate that ridicule could transform into inspiration, that those considered valueless by civilization frequently possessed the most value. 5 years subsequently, Sarah positioned in the identical location where she'd initially observed the dwelling. Yet presently, instead of decomposition, she observed existence. Offspring participated in the cultivation areas. Mothers rested on the restored veranda, distributing heated beverage and discussion. The woodland no longer appeared shadowy but defensive, embracing the shelter it protected. Mason, presently 12, labored beside her in the plant cultivation area they'd established where the ancient pathway used to fragment. He was expanding, elevated, assured, compassionate, everything she'd desired for when she'd labored those 3 positions and sobbed those silent tears. "Mom," he stated, extracting upward a particularly enormous orange root vegetable. "Do you ever consider about what would have occurred if you hadn't unsealed that entrance?" Sarah contemplated the inquiry, considering all the entrances, the underground level entrance, the secure storage entrance, yet predominantly the entrance to potential that she'd compelled ajar with bleeding appendages and determined aspiration. "We would have been acceptable," she stated ultimately. "We constantly were." Yet occasionally the cosmos provides you an opportunity to be beyond acceptable, to assist others be beyond acceptable as well. And Great Aunt Vivian comprehended you'd accomplish that. I consider, Sarah stated gradually, she aspired. She accepted a wager on the relative member everybody additional had dismissed. And perhaps that's the genuine bequest, somebody trusting you're valuable of the wager. That night, as twilight colored the atmosphere violet and golden, Sarah descended once additional to the secure storage. Solely a cluster of precious stones remained, sparkling in their holders like captured celestial bodies. She'd been cautious, calculated, creating each one significant. Shortly they'd entirely be departed, altered into education and opportunity and aspiration. Yet the sanctuary would exist without them. Presently it possessed its personal momentum, its personal supporters, its personal narrative that possessed nothing to accomplish with concealed treasure, and everything to accomplish with human resilience. She retrieved one tiny rock, maintaining it to the illumination. Tomorrow it would transform into educational funding for 3 offspring. Subsequent week, the final of them would finance an expansion to assist grandmothers nurturing grand offspring, and then the genuine labor would persist, because Sarah had discovered something in these 5 years, something more valuable than all the precious stones her ancestors had accumulated. Genuine wealth wasn't what you concealed in the obscurity. It was what you transported into the illumination. The relatives still murmured about her at relative assemblies she no longer participated. Yet presently the murmurs possessed a distinct tone, jealousy combined with confusion. How had valueless Sarah constructed something they couldn't obtain their method into? How had the relative ridicule transformed into the relative inheritance? Janet had attempted to explore once, materializing with an expensive present and vacant apologies. Sarah had received her, yet not as relative. As any other individual requesting assistance, Janet had accepted one observation at the reception documents: the obligation to contribute labor to the society, the elementary chambers without extravagance, and departed. She desired particular handling, the variety wealth typically obtained. Yet at Brackenridge Shelter, value wasn't evaluated in currency. The woodland dwelling that had previously positioned as a structure to hidden truths and ridicule presently resonated with cackling and aspiration. Where particles had assembled, offspring presently accomplished educational assignments. Where entrances had been blocked, females progressed freely. Where obscurity had controlled, illumination flooded through restored openings. And in the underground level, the secure storage entrance positioned ajar, not because it was vacant, but because Sarah possessed nothing remaining to conceal. As she ascended the stairs one final occasion, Sarah considered she detected something in the barriers, not the adjustment of aged timber or the murmur of breeze, but something that resonated nearly like approval. Vivian's spirit, perhaps. Ultimately at Tranquility, understanding her wager had succeeded. Or perhaps it was simply the noise of a dwelling that had discovered to respire once more, occupied with the tones of females who'd been informed they were valueless, demonstrating every individual sunrise that they were precious stones throughout. They simply required somebody to observe their illumination. The ridicule that had previously characterized Sarah's existence had transformed into the extremely thing that qualified her to alter others. The relatives who'd cackled at her bequest possessed zero comprehension what they genuinely missed. Not the precious stones, but the opportunity to be fragment of something that signified, because ultimately, Vivian had been accurate. The genuine examination wasn't locating the treasure, it was what you accomplished with it. And Sarah Caldwell, the adolescent mother everybody had dismissed, the battling solitary mother who'd been ridiculed at every rotation, had succeeded that examination in methods nobody could have envisioned. The woodland dwelling positioned resilient against one more Appalachian cold season, combustion ascending from heating passages, illuminations radiating comfortable against the frozen precipitation. Within, relatives assembled for evening meal. Offspring assisted with cleaning utensils. Mothers schemed their futures, and hidden in the barriers, if you attended meticulously, you could detect the resonance of a harsh female's ultimate action of compassion, selecting to confide the one individual everybody additional had rejected. Anybody can receive wealth. Yet it requires somebody particular to receive an intention and alter it into an inheritance that transforms existences. Sarah had accomplished both, and the 15 million that had previously rested in obscurity had ultimately located their method into the illumination. One altered existence at an occasion, as the lunar sphere ascended beyond the woodland, projecting metallic darkness through the evergreen vegetation. Sarah positioned Mason into slumber in their quarters at the sanctuary. They'd relocated in continuously 2 years previously, not because they had to, but because this was residence presently. Not simply the construction, but the society. the intention, the existence they'd constructed from somebody additional's ridicule. "Mom," Mason stated drowsily, "I'm content we're not wealthy." Sarah halted, astonished. They existed modestly, yet they absolutely weren't impoverished anymore. "What's your reasoning?" "Because," he exhaled, "if we were wealthy like those relatives, we might be spiteful as well. Yet we're something superior. What's that?" "Beneficial. From the oral cavities of youngsters, genuinely." As Sarah deactivated his illumination and progressed through the corridors of the sanctuary, verifying on relatives, examining tomorrow's agenda, scheming the subsequent expansion, she comprehended her boy was accurate. The precious stones had created them comfortable, yet their selection to distribute that comfort had created them something more valuable, essential. The female who'd been ridiculed for receiving a valueless dwelling had constructed something past cost, and in accomplishing so, she located that the genuine treasure had never been in the underground level whatsoever. It had been in her capacity to observe value where others observed garbage, to locate precious stones where others located particles, and to alter ridicule into inspiration. The woodland dwelling rested tranquilly underneath the celestial bodies, protecting vision possessors and constructors and females who declined to be characterized by other individuals' perspectives. And in the dawn, the labor would persist, because that's what genuine bequest resembled. Not a sudden gain that resolved your difficulties, but an obligation that provided your existence significance. Sarah Caldwell had received both, and she'd reversed ridicule into a crusade. One mother at an occasion. The conclusion, upcoming. 2 additional powerful narratives that will restore your confidence in unexpected gifts. Select to persist this voyage with us, and don't abandon to smash register if you trust that occasionally the largest treasures arrive concealed as burdens.